South Africa put 50 points on Wales, so is it just a meaningless warm-up game? Or is it a sobering warning of what's going to happen in the World Cup? Anyway, let's get into the game and then we'll talk about the position groups. So, I'm going to do it slightly different this week. Rather than break down every incident, I'm going to talk about some positives and some negatives from the game. Starting, of course, with the positives. Probably the biggest positive for me was the line-out. It actually functioned really well without Adam Beard, again might I add. They actually won pretty much all of their ball. The only one I think they lost was unfortunately the one that was on the South African line, which is obviously the most important one. But generally really happy with how that went. Also, it was good to see some young players getting some experience, with Kai Evans and Teddy Williams getting their first cap. Congratulations to them. The two props also getting some vital minutes against probably one of the best packs in the world, and another couple of young players getting some more minutes in the back line. My other positives were Jack Morgan was just fantastic again. He was literally everywhere on that park. Anything that Wales did good in defence and even in attack he was involved in. Never stopped for the whole game, never took a backward step. He can be really, really happy with his afternoon. Also again, Tane Bashan coming off the bench really impressed me. He was again busy, aggressive, he was all over the place. Really liked his impact coming off the bench again. And my final positive, which might sound negative but it isn't, is similar to what Gat said last week in his press conference. I think he learned a few players who just weren't up to the standard again today. Maybe just not ready because of youth, but there's a few players that might have been on the sort of peripherals of making that World Cup squad. But you don't want to find out that they are not ready when you've actually taken them and you need them in a game, you know. And I think he learned today that one or two just aren't ready. Before I move on to the negatives, I think the scrum was so-so. Started not great, got better as the game went on, but even still, the Springboks put them under a lot of pressure the whole game. But the negatives, I've got a slightly bigger list, unfortunately. So it was the worst defeat to South Africa in Cardiff at home ever. Not ideal. And though the line-out was really good, the maul was absolutely blunt. We must have tried about 10 plus mauls and we made very little yardage on any of them at all. Building on that, whenever we did get into an opportunity to score or put in pressure in their 22, which was very few, we made mistakes. So the missed line-out was one, the Kieran Hardy interception was another. So when we were actually creating opportunities in the actual Springbok half, we just made mistakes and just released the pressure. But the biggest issue, which will not be a shock to anyone because we conceded 52 points, was the defence. The tackling was not great. There was a lot of missed tackles. There wasn't really any dominant tackles. We really struggled with the line speed to get off the line and cause them issues. They were just all over us. And I know we had quite an inexperienced team, but there was nobody, it seemed like, managing the back line in defence. There was so much space every time South Africa went wide. It was just so much space for them. They were just running into gaps, finding the edge every single time, finding space for Colby. And it was just poor all around in the defence, which is a shame because over the last two games, it really looked like that was something that they'd shored up in camp, and it looked like it was going to be a real strength like it was under Gatland before. And taking nothing away from South Africa, they were really, really sharp, but I think we gave them a lot of opportunities, way more than we should have. Yeah, it was just poor, and the discipline was poor because the defence was constantly under pressure, so it just all boiled into just one mess, basically. But that is the end of my list, thankfully. If you think I missed something out that you saw, please feel free to comment below. And now I think we'll just look at the position groups and who impressed, who didn't. But starting with the front row, I'm not really sure what to think of this. We'll focus on D. The line-out was good. I thought he was busy around the park. I think he did a pretty good job. A few scrum penalties went against him, which I feel were harsh, maybe, because sometimes it felt like South Africa were nudging a little bit early, but there was an issue with the break foot or something. I don't have a clue what goes on in the front row. But I thought D had a good afternoon. And with the way the line-out went last week, I think he's probably nailed on to start, especially if Derry Lake's injured. The two props, it was a difficult one. They were good around the park, specifically Domachowski put a big hit in early on the second row, and he took quite a clever knee at one point to slow the game down, which I think the referee knew exactly what he was doing. So that was a heads-up play. He got his foot caught and fell over at the ruck time, and that eventually caused the South Africa try. But I'm not going to hold that against him. I think he just got caught up on the scrum half or something. Azarati too was solid around the park, but the scrum was an issue again. I know I said D had a couple that were pinged against him, but they did show character and they did come back towards the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half, win a couple of penalties back, get a little bit of parity in the scrum. So I think they'll both go, and in fact actually I'm going to say they both will go. I think Gatland likes them. I think he just sees something in them, and I think he's going to take them to France with him. And if you want to hold me to that, don't forget you can subscribe, and then when he announces his team Monday and I break it down, you can slate me in the comments if I'm wrong. But moving swiftly on, the second rows, I thought they were good without doing too much. I thought Rowlands was good. He was actually really good around the park. The line-out was good, as we've said before. And more importantly, he's proved his fitness now, and then he'll be ready for the World Cup after such a long injury. And he got his 2 caps, so now he's got 25 caps. So he's clear for the 25 cap rule thing. But Carter was okay. I think he had an opportunity, if he put in a massive performance, that he could have booked his spot and maybe even be fighting for a starting spot. I don't think he did enough, unfortunately. But it was a decent display from him. I think he might have done enough to get in the squad for the World Cup, but I don't think he's going to be fighting for a starting spot. The back row was okay. It was a lot of tackling for them boys today, not a lot of carrying, unfortunately. But Jack Morgan just again continued to just show that he's class, and he's really just put his hand up, especially since they named him captain. He was great before, but he's just excelled. He's really showed his worth and his ability in the last 2 games, so congratulations for him. I think he's almost certainly going to be the World Cup captain, so massive honour for him and his family. Well done, mate. And as I mentioned in the positives, I thought Basham was good again coming off the bench. And I think he was probably lower down the pecking order when it came to the back row for these summer series games, but the 2 games he's had off the bench, he's made a real impact, so he's done everything he can, and he should be happy with himself. But other than that, keep your fingers and toes crossed that Faletau is fit for game 1. Moving on to the backs, there was a lot of movement around with players coming in and out. Cuthbert, Bigger and Liam Williams pulling out. Gatland said that if it was the World Cup semi-final that Bigger and Liam Williams would have played, it was just a precautionary, but Cuthbert not being able to get any minutes under his belt, I think that's probably him out of the squad, unfortunately for him, because it was just due to injuries, not performance. But anyway, Kieran Hardy, that was definitely not his best game. His kicking wasn't great, and he was responsible for that interception of Du Toit, which ended up Jesse Creel going the length of the field. In his defence, the rucks were not clean exactly for Wales. A lot of South Africans slowing the ball down, but he was poor, and he's definitely put himself right to the bottom of the pecking order of those scrum halves. Costello was a late replacement. I thought he was okay. He's so brave in defence. He didn't take a backward step. His goal kicking was good, but he didn't really create anything. Like, he looked sharp in the first England game, but didn't really look like that today. I thought with Hardy on his inside and Johnny Williams on his outside, obviously his Scarlets club mates, that he would have been fine and they would have had a bit of chemistry, but it just didn't click for some reason. Maybe just due to the mess that the South Africans were causing at the ruck time, or just him being a late replacement. Yeah, it just didn't work, but he had a decent afternoon. He kicked his goals, which is obviously important. Unfortunately, he did go off, but I think it might have been just a head incident. He dived on the ball, brave work again, but he got clattered by one of the South African forwards, had to go off injured, so hopefully nothing too serious. As for his clubmate Johnny Williams, he will probably be quite frustrated. Started off quite well, had a decent carry, bumped out of a tackle, and then made some good yards afterwards, some good tackling and rucking, but I think the defence was out in the back line was so poor. Obviously playing with Grady, who he's never played with before, but it was just poor. Like, there's no real other way you can describe it. He'll be frustrated. He had an opportunity, I think, to get picked, but he had to be completely flawless. Also through that interception, didn't really look where he was passing, and that was just, it just compiled, unfortunately. Also, frustrating day for Grady, didn't get any ball whatsoever. He had that real frustrating, it was a kick behind. He did really well, showed really good pace to get back to cover, and unfortunately he lost the ball as he was getting tackled over the line. Rather than just dab it down, he had it in one hand, he got tackled, it sort of flung in the air. I think it was Jesse Creel dotted it down, so frustrating afternoon for him. I think he'll learn from it, but the defence in the back line was definitely something to worry about. But on a positive, I thought when Llewellyn came on it looked better. But anyway, finishing up on the back three. Obviously a big congrats to Kai Evans, he made his test debut, congratulations to him. I thought he looked pretty confident, pretty assured. He didn't really make any mistakes that I can think of. He's got a big boot, and he also slotted into 10 at one point towards the end of the game when Costello went off, and looked pretty comfortable there too, and he kicked his conversion with the parry try. So not a bad afternoon for him in fairness. As for the two wingers, well, Rio Dyer had a real mixed bag. He's so electric when he gets the ball. He just constantly looks like he's going to beat defenders, and he does beat them. And he's also deceptively strong, but I think his defence lets him down at times, and I know there was a lot of overlaps today, but his defence wasn't great again. I think his yellow card was slightly harsh. I guess by the letter of the law he did push it out into touch, but I think Moody knocked it on, and the TMO had a million looks at it, and I thought the ball moved when it went past Moody's hand, but they didn't call it. They said it was a penalty try, which I disagree with, but it wouldn't have made a difference in the game, I don't think. And then unfortunately he had that clash of heads. I think it was Willemse tackled him, and he went off with a HIA. It looked like he got split on his head, so hopefully he's not too bad, not too banged up, but yeah, he looked good with the ball, bad without it, so I'm not sure what how he's gonna assess that. Tom Rogers on the other wing, on the other hand, he had a difficult afternoon. Again, a late call-up, so, you can sort of give him that as a young player, but he had a torrid afternoon with Colby. He's not the only winger that's ever had a torrid afternoon against Colby, don't get me wrong, but he really struggled. He was just poor in defence again, and again, it's not just his fault because he was getting isolated a lot, but he was missing tackles, he was making wrong reads. I think the Marks try was partly on him. He flew up on Khaleesi, overran it, and then was going back to tackle Khaleesi, and that's how he got his hands through the tackle. But after that then, he just seemed like he was more or less chasing shadows all afternoon. But I don't want to be too critical. He was a late call-up. It's a massive game. It's a scratch team thrown together. A lot of players changing late on. So he's just got to chalk it up as a learning day and just hopefully improve this season and just target to get back amongst it in the Six Nations. Other than that, Rhys Sammet came on, didn't really have much to do. Teddy Williams actually came on, I don't know if I said, and won his first cap. Unfortunately also won his first yellow and had to spend 10 minutes on the sideline after just coming on, so he will not be happy with his afternoon's work, but he's one for the future, I think, so, he's got his first cap under his belt. But to summarise, I think Wales had a little bit of a come down to earth moment. I myself have been guilty of getting a little bit carried away with what happened in the two England games. Although we lost the second one, I thought we looked okay. The first one we looked okay. Few young players coming through, a lot of young players coming through actually, so I was looking positive. I thought Gats had sort of turned us around, and I thought we were really building up some depth, but I think it's a bit of an awakening, just as our squad isn't as deep as we might have thought. A lot of young players to come through, so let's just hope this was just an opportunity for them to get some international experience, and they'll all learn from it, which no doubt they will. And at the end of the day, it's just a warm-up game, and I don't know if many of these players will be starting against Fiji, so it is what it is. Having said that, Gatland announces his World Cup squad on Monday, so subscribe to the channel, and as soon as it comes out, I will get a video up and we can talk about it. Thanks for watching.